This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Paradise, your film and music show, and this is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena. And folks, I have an awesome musician here on the phone, and he's also somebody who's dabbled in film. But I've checked out his latest video, and I gotta say we got a few things in common in terms of our passions. Coming straight from Mike Gormley, who has sent me many guests, I am pleased to present Andras Jones. Did I get that right?
Oh, you got the second syllable right. It's actually Andras.
Andras. You know what? I was worried I was going to screw that up.
It's always happened. It's a high wire act.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, well. Andras Jones. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, I'm honored. You know, I was actually watching you do some performances there on the line last night. I'm trying to think of the songs that you had performed. I think it was a YouTube performance.
Oh, they're out there. There's there's ones of me with my band, The Previous.
Okay, here's...
There's some of my own stuff, and then I've done some interesting cover projects that whenever we do those, I like to get them up online.
Well, these ones here were all at the same place. You performed Own Your Lips, Girl, and
yes.
Action.
Yeah, that was at the Olympia Music Awards back in 2012. And got to perform with a really great songwriter named Kendall Winter, who's in a band called The Lowest Pair. She plays banjo with me on a couple of songs. And I'm glad you checked that out.
Yes, I checked those out. So, what do you mean, own your lips, girl?
Well, that's an interesting song. There's a story that goes with that. So I won't say the person in particular, but there was a group that I was working with called Sync Book Press. They put out a book of mine called Accidental Initiations. Mm-hmm. And that crowd and that community were really into exploring synchronicity in culture, and in music and in film and in all kinds of different ways. And of course, they were interested in me because I host a podcast, or at the time was hosting a radio show and a live theatrical event called Radio 8 Ball, that is a musical divination show. We answer questions by picking songs at random and then interpreting them like musical tarot cards. And that, of course, is highly informed by synchronicity. Mm-hmm. So they gravitated towards me. And then a lot of people, there's people who create, like, I don't know if you've ever seen them, they're called sync films. They're films that will track the synchronicities of a particular actor through many films. And the Natalie Wood Said video, the song for the single off of my new record, is kind of informed also by that ethos. The guy who edited it was one of the main guys at Sync Book Press. So there's a long way to go around to say it. There's a lot of different avenues for exploring synchronicity in art. And we would, over the course of the time we were all working together, every year or so we would avoid, that's a Freudian slip. We would organize a sync summit. So people would come and give presentations about different aspects of synchronicity. And this woman came and gave this talk about the Rolling Stone Lips and their relationship to Kali, the destroyer, birther goddess from Hinduism, I believe. And then later on, she took issue with a chapter that was in my book. I don't know how to, I probably can't swear on this, so I won't swear, but she took issue with, if anyone was to look up my book, Accidental Initiation, mm-hmm. There was a word that she took issue with as a woman in the way that the book intended, in a way, it uses some intense language to try and draw a certain energy and attention, and it did. And an engagement on the phone about this, I was like, hey, you know, you gave this great presentation on Collie and the Rolling Stones, you know, own your lips, girl.
Okay.
It seems like a very Rolling Stones kind of title.
Mm-hmm.
And we played out the kind of conversation that is going on a lot. This happened like 5 or 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That it was one of the first of tenor of conversation that I feel like we're having more and more and more and more now. And so it came from that song came from the heat of that conversation, sort of in an intellectual debate that, you know, that got heated in a way that these debates are now very much so. And yeah, so that's where that song lives. The song lives in the nexus of that conversation.
Yeah.
And you know, it's one of those songs, I don't know about if you have, I mean, you talk with a lot of songwriters on your show, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain songs, like, you don't necessarily write, I don't know how other songwriters write, but to me, I like to go to where the problem is and explore it. And that, you know, doesn't necessarily create the best pop material, but I think that's where a lot of the cultural heat is in terms of songwriting, is go to the difficult conversations, like in the Randy Newman way, and inhabit a point of view. And then some days you're going to sing that and you're going to agree with that point of view, and some days you're going to sing it and you're not going to agree with that point of view. But if the song keeps turning on you in that way, then I feel like it's really doing its work, as opposed to, you know, a song that's easy to get behind, but doesn't really have any juice. After a while, you're like, okay, you know, trees are green, trees are green, trees are green. I don't know how long I can sing that. I know it's true. Trees are green. I don't have to change my point of view around it at any point. So this is a really interesting jumping off point for that record that you started there, because that's a song that's actually written for what I hope will be a next record after All You Get, which is the one that I'm ostensibly here to promote.
Mm-hmm. Well, I watched you perform a song called Action as well, and I enjoyed that.
Oh, yeah, that's another one from... Yeah, that's... so we're jumping in at an interesting point here, because that performance happened at a time when I was really not doing... I mean, I was right. I'm always right, but I'm not always right. I'm sorry. I'm always writing.
Yep.
I'm mostly wrong, but I'm always writing. And but at that point, I was really not performing. The record that I'm promoting right now, that's coming out on August 8th, called All You Get, which I recorded with a bunch of Canada's finest: Ford Pierre, Veda Hilly, Frazee Ford, Barry Morashnik, Keith Rose, some really amazing folks, mostly based out of Vancouver at that point. That I recorded that in 2001, and then a lot of things happened in my life, and I just kind of walked away and became a bartender, and devoted my time to working on Radio 8 Fall, to writing a book. Music got, I don't know, too intense for me.
You got a lot of...
And Own Your Lips. Oh, go on.
I was going to say, you got a lot of talents in a lot of places. You've been in movies, you've got your own podcast, you've written books, and you're a musician. Like, you've got a lot of talents in a lot of areas. And it's interesting because I sat down and I watched the video for Natalie Wood Said, and I got to ask, why Natalie Wood?
Well... First of all, thanks for the nice thing, saying the nice thing about my talents. I think I only have one talent, which is speaking English and raising my voice or lowering my voice, and then finding different ways to do it, whether it's in writing or in song or in acting. It's all just using the voice to tell a story. Mm-hmm. But and so Natalie Wood. Well, first, there's a couple things. First of all, I think you can probably get my writing process is intuitive, and I don't know. I don't want to say that it's sacred writ large, but to me, I take it. I'm one of those songwriters who sort of I don't engage. I engage intellectually after the fact, but while I'm writing, it's very intuitive. So it's like, why did you have a dream about someone? So Natalie Wood came into it because it was just kind of like a dream. But then after she came into the song, I realized that what a huge cultural figure she is. Now, in the song, the line is, Natalie Wood said, and if you've ever seen the movie Rebel Without a Cause...
I've seen it many times.
So she says this great line in it that just stuck with me forever. So she's talking with Plato, who's played by Sal Mineo, about James Dean. And I think Sal Mineo says, when he says something, he means it.
Yep.
Sincere. And she's like, that's the main thing. And we want to believe that, right? That that's really the main thing, is to be sincere. But I think if you live long enough to try and be your own version of James Dean, you find out that there's a lot more than sincerity that's required. And so in a way, the song is about the pleasant lie that we tell ourselves, or that we allow the world or our mothers to tell us, that, all you have to do is be a good boy and everything will be great. And in that sense, Natalie Wood is she's totally of my mother's generation, and because we were able to be with her from her early childhood as an actor right through her untimely demise, there's a way that she just seems like such a cultural touchstone of a kind of woman that I'm very familiar with from my mother's generation. And then when I started to really dig into her films and look at just the issues and how deep her filmography goes in terms of what it has to tell us about that time, and particularly about the sexual revolution and women at that time in film, it's just pretty phenomenal. So yeah, that's why Natalie. You're going to get a lot of long answers here.
That's okay. People want to hear you, not me. So, is Rebel Without a Cause your favorite Natalie Wood film?
No.
What's your favorite?
It's my Rebel Without a Cause is maybe one of my favorite films, but it's my favorite because of James Dean.
Okay.
Natalie Wood's good in it, but no, I would say probably, I think ground zero great Natalie Wood is This Property is Condemned.
Okay.
I think that is, and Splendor in the Grass. I mean, Splendor in the Grass with Warren Beatty, and This Property is Condemned with Robert Redford, and Love with a Proper Stranger with Steve McQueen. Those three are pretty right when she was at her most amazingness, but most amazing. But I mean, but then there's all these great things like Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice is an amazing film, and she has a really hard role to sell in that, and she does it wonderfully.
I've interviewed Greg Malevy in that film, and he was talking about working with Natalie.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite Natalie Wood films, I loved her in Blake Edwards' The Great Race.
Oh, yeah.
I love the fact she's the lone female in what is considered the biggest pie fight ever, and she's just elegant, and she gets plastered, and it's and she went with it.
Oh no, she's great. And then I mean, her work as a child actor is phenomenal. I mean, think of the amazing films that she's been in that weren't her film. She was in The Searchers. She was in Rebel Without a Cause. She was in A Miracle on 34th Street.
Yes. Yep.
The film, and I'm trying to look it up right now. There was a film. that her first film was with Orson Welles. I think it's called Tomorrow is Forever. And if it weren't for Welles and Natalie Wood, I don't think it would be a film that's worth watching.
Okay.
But it's from 1946, and all of Natalie's, so it's her first real role. She's 8 years old. All of her scenes are with Orson Welles.
Okay.
And she's playing a German Jewish refugee. She's doing a German accent. She's a very highly emotional role. And if you know much about Orson Welles at that time, he had a reputation for sort of taking over the direction of scenes that he was in when he was working as an actor. And so it's really easy to imagine that he basically directed Natalie Wood's performance in that, because all of their scenes are together. And there are some shots in it that really there's one in the video for Natalie Wood Said where young Natalie is skipping along next to a young but made up to look old Orson Welles. Mm-hmm. And there's this pan shot that looks like it could just come right out of Magnificent Ambersons.
Okay.
And you can just hear Orson Welles just being like, well, what if you did it this way? But just thinking of being that 8-year-old Natalie and that being your first experience in film is working directly with probably the greatest American director of all time, giving you all of his attention and helping you be great. And then you go on from that to James Dean, to Steve McQueen, to Warren Beatty, to Christopher Walken, to West Side Story. Like, she's so embedded in our psyches, and in a way that it's surprising that the only thing people ever really talk about her about is that she drowned and maybe that she was in West Side Story. But for the most part, people will go on and on about how great Jane Fonda is, and I love Jane Fonda, but Jane Fonda, if you start to explore Natalie Wood, you see that Jane Fonda's kind of standing on the shoulders of Natalie.
I've never really thought a whole lot. Like, I'm aware of her drowning and whatnot, but it's kind of like Sharon Tate, I like to think outside that and look about who they were as an artist, who they were as a person. And I've seen a lot of Natalie Wood films, The Ghost of Mrs. Mayer, Miracle on 34th Street, of course, The Great Race, which I enjoyed. I never really think a whole lot about West Side Story. I liked it, but I thought it was a little silly. But and she's done comedy, she's done serious work. I think she's been all across the board. And of course, Rebel Without a Cause, that's a standout. The Searchers, like, she's done a lot of great stuff. It's interesting because when you did the song about her, it kind of reminded me of a woman I was kind of fixated on from that time, and that was Grace Kelly. And they both have an elegance to them,
Yeah, but Grace Kelly never said it was enough for her. Grace Kelly was like always. It was like that. I love Grace Kelly, but her thing is very different. Like, she's not hanging out. She's the one who's, too good for Bing Crosby in High Society, or there was something about her that was never, you know what I mean? Like, again, I'm not trying to trash on Grace Kelly, but the idea, the Natalie Wood saying it, all you have to do is be sincere and I'll go with you anywhere. Grace Kelly's like, you better be a prince, you better have money, you better be, you better really bring it, or you're not worth my time.
Yeah, and that Prince that Prince pretty much took her out of her film roles too, which kind of shitty,
Well, Hollywood at that time for women, I bet, to be a chance to have a choice of going and being a princess, or being royalty someplace else, or dealing with what we're now finding out it was like for so many women then, I bet it was good. It was a good choice for her, but who knows? And again, I'm not a Grace Kelly expert. I'm hardly even a Natalie Wood expert. I'm just a guy who loves film and has way too much time on his hands.
Actually, I don't blame you for loving Natalie Wood. I mean, she's fascinating. I watched that video and watched all the clips, and I was like, it was like, wow, this is, because I love old school, I love the movies back then, I find today there's not a whole lot of, and I hate to trash anybody today, but back then a lot of the actors had something about them that really made them stand out, that made them click with history, Natalie Wood is one of these people that stood out that way, it's not just her movies, or something about her, We get a lot of actresses out there, not all of them stick, or actors for that moment. Not all of them stick. They're a face, you're entertained for a few hours, but there are a few that stick with you, and Natalie Wood is one of them.
Yeah, well, she's I guess you could say that she's a late success story for the studio system. Mm-hmm. She definitely came up in that studio system when they really there was a big machine engaged in crafting and building movie stars and building products around those stars in a way that they did with Natalie. And again, if you go back and you see that, I mean, Miracle on 34th is she's wonderful in it. But if you go back and see Tomorrow Is Forever, it's pretty available out there, mm-hmm. and it's not listed as an Orson Welles directorial film. It doesn't look like it's going to be good. But you watch that and you see the talent on this kid, and you see why she grew. And then later, she was at every phase of her career, she was sort of the right thing for that time. Like when she was in her full-on box office star mode, she was as gorgeous and goddessy as anyone. And when she was the teenage rebel, whether it was in Searchers or in Rebel Without a Cause or even up into Splendor in the Grass, again, she was so, like, you knew her. Yeah, it was amazing. It was it's funny. I don't want to ride. I wrote the song because she got into my psyche, mm-hmm. and I've become a fan. Really working on the video with Alan Abadessa Green, mm-hmm. In the way, like, I already knew I was, but going back and watching all this stuff, I've become very energized about it. Mm-hmm. But there is a little bit of a fear of like, hey, I don't want to just ride Natalie's coattails. She's great in her own right, but it's fun in a weird way that from a synchronistic standpoint, the video comes out at the end of July. Mm-hmm. That was our plan, and then we just found out that. I just realized that was Natalie Wood's birthday, and so it's coming out on what would be her 81st birthday. Mm-hmm. And we just saw that Quentin Tarantino, he's coming out with his new film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and his theater in L.A. Mm-hmm. is doing a little celebration of sort of it girls like Sharon Tate, and they're doing one on Natalie Wood. Mm-hmm. They're going to be celebrating her birthday. So there is, it's like when you start paying attention to something, you realize that the other people who were paying attention to it, mm-hmm. like Natalie Wood wasn't really on my radar as a conversation 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. It was a song and it was something that was there, but now it does seem like there is a resurgence of interest in her catalog, which I think is, warranted, totally warranted.
Actually, Tomorrow Is Forever is listed as being directed by Irving Pitchell.
Right, that's what I'm saying. He was.
Yeah, he was starring in it. Orson Welles. Yeah.
He was a studio guy, mm-hmm. and they got Orson Welles as an actor. Mm-hmm. But at that time, Orson was notorious for being kind of a creative bully.
Oh, okay.
In charge of things.
Okay.
So I'm not saying he directed it, but if you look at it and from a film scholar standpoint, you can see some Wellesian touches, and it makes more sense to me that Wells is sort of taking over, like from someone who he can sort of artistically bully, than that whoever that is paying tribute to Orson Welles' films.
Okay.
In 1946, because again, this is 46. Orson Welles is still a pretty big force, even though Kane, he had his
Citizen Kane, yeah.
But at that time, he was going around working for FDR, speaking. You know, he's actually considering he was actually considering going into politics because he was such a sort of larger than life figure, sort of like Chaplin. So yes, no, I'm not. I want to be clear. I'm not saying that he directed that film, but I'm not saying he didn't direct parts of it.
Well,
and I think very clearly the work with Natalie Wood is so, like, again, they're in every scene together, and if you've ever worked with someone, your scene partner, they don't direct it, but they do, because whatever they're doing determines what you're going to do. And you put Wells with an 8-year-old girl about those talents, and you get that performance out of her. It's hard not to think that the master put his hand on and said, "Hey, this is how you're going to. You want to do a German accent? Here, this is how you do the German." You know, I can't even do a German. I don't even know what I was just about to do. But, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So the new CD is called All You Get. Now,
All You Get.
All You Get. I like that. I like that title. Explain that.
Well, the title track is called All You Get. And the idea, and this is, I guess, something that's been at the back of a lot of my songs ever since I first started writing, was sort of this sense of that this, you know, it's not a revolutionary idea, that this moment is all we have, and that we don't know what's going to happen in the future, except that, you know, that at some point there's going to be diminishing returns. And the song itself was written at a time when I didn't realize it, but I was really running out of energy. I've been touring and putting out records for 10 years independently, while trying to sort of maintain a film career as an actor and a marriage and navigate just the deaths of some very close people and just a lot of different things. And so I was working on this record, and this song came out of that. And I didn't, you know, sometimes songs can have a prescient quality. I didn't mean it as sort of as passive aggressive as it sort of sounds, which is like, this is all you get, and I'm out of here. But it ended up turning out that that's what it was, is that I worked on this record in Vancouver in 2001 with Ford Pierre and a bunch of really great Canadian artists. I think I said this already, but I want to say their names as much as possible, because I hope that on the Canadian audience will be aware of people like Ford Pierre and Veda Hilly and Barry Marachnik, who's a drummer who toured a lot with Nico Case, Frazee Ford and Samantha Parton from the Be Good Tanyas, Keith Rose, who's just a great bass player, all-around cool guy out of Vancouver. And so I'd known them, and I played a bunch in Canada, and they were some of my favorite musicians. So we put it all on the line to make this record, and then we got it about 80% there. It was all recorded and just needed to be mixed. And then some more things happened in my life that just made me just not care anymore for a while, and about this record, particularly because it felt so prescient, because it seemed like just me writing some songs about where I was at afterwards looked like, oh, I knew that there was this wave of not goodness that was about to crash down on me, but I didn't know it. So it seemed very, there's a way that I feel like the record is a document of a guy who no longer exists. because some things happened in my life that made me a different person. So in a sense, that idea of all you get is, it's a very... Are you familiar with the story of Lao... And again, I'm not comparing myself to this person, but the story of Lao Tzu, the philosopher who wrote the Tao Te Ching. Supposedly the story is that he was about to walk off into the wilderness, and someone said, hey, well, you've been teaching, could you write down your teachings? And he sat down and wrote the Tao Te Ching, gave it to them, and then walked off into the wilderness and was never heard from again. And it's, I'm sure, apocryphal. They say that was actually probably written by many different people, but the idea is the same, of sort of like, this is it. This is all I have for you, and I'm out. And now it's weird. It's not really a lie. But I am back doing this again, 18 years later, and feeling good about it, and very happy for the work that guy did to make this record, so that I have some songs to play that aren't "Own Your Lips, Girl,"
yeah.
and yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, I know, and this goes back to where we touched upon those early songs, and here we have the new record. How have you changed as a musician since then? I know that, like, in terms of a songwriter and being just in terms of being a musician with your instruments and whatnot, how have you changed? How have you the progress compared to then to now?
Well, very simply, at that time, I was really pursuing my art as a songwriter, and I wrote constantly. I was always in pursuit of the next great song that I could write, and really a songwriting for the sake of songwriting, because that's what I did. And I think the record reflects that there's a certain amount of just real dedication to the craft at that point. Now I still have all the skills that I developed from that, but now I don't pursue songs anymore. I write songs only when I have to. Sort of like I feel like it's like a samurai who only takes out the sword when it's time, when it's really time. I don't just take it out to practice anymore. And again, I'm using a lot of very generous analogies to myself. I hope that listeners.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yep.
A great philosopher or a samurai swordsman, but it's a craft, and there are artists who, honed a craft over a lifetime. There's a point where you are just so devoted to getting good at your instrument and getting good at what you do and being better than other people and all of these things of like just being challenging your craft. And at a certain point you realize, oh, now I can do this. I don't need to write 100 songs this week to prove to myself that I can do this. I know that I can. If there's a need for a song, I can write that song. But
if I may,
other things to do in the world.
If I may interject here, I got to say this. You mentioned the philosophy thing and whatnot. It's interesting because when Mike Gormley sent me your stuff and I looked over, one thing that grabbed my attention is the name All You Get, or Natalie Wood Said. Before listening to the songs, my mind, for example, was just embracing the title of these songs. I like where your titles come from, because you hear a lot of these empty pop songs on the radio that, you forget about. But I love the fact that before I listen to the song, I'm thinking, Natalie Wood Said, All You Get, and I'm already interested. Is that something you put thought into as your song titles when you deliver this?
I go back and forth on my titling, to be honest. I enjoy the process of titling, a lot of the songs on this record don't really have what you'd call traditional choruses. So the title really sort of anchors the song.
Do you have a favorite track on the album?
Like it's a line that comes back to you throughout the song and reminds you where we're at in a way that a chorus would. But like I said, there aren't a lot of traditional sort of, okay, here we're at the chorus and we're going to repeat something that three lines that we've heard over and over again. And I like to keep songs interesting to myself. So the musicians that I like, whether it's The Who or Elvis Costello or They Might Be Giants or Ricky Lee Jones, these are all people who their titles are evocative. You know, Chuck E's In Love, I Got to Know, made me go out and seek out this guy, Chucky Weiss. Or, you know, I'm thinking of like a recent Pete Towns thing, like he has a song called Another Mike Post Theme. Or even I Can See for My, like just go, Bob O'Reilly, what does that mean? You know? And, you know, They Might Be Giants, of course, and like Birdhouse in Your Soul. These, you know, all these things, they're compelling linguistically. So I guess it's just an aesthetic thing that I'm into. And it's also I really do come at songwriting as a writer, more than as a musician. So, of course, that's not, again, not because I don't practice my instrument, but just because I know great musicians, and I know that just like they probably could never write a song called Cartesian Shack and convince themselves that it was worth doing, I could never, you know, just jump on one of their songs and make them sound great the way that someone like Ford Pierre, who actually does both. If you wanted to hear some compelling titles, check out Ford Pierre's stuff. He has it all going on.
Do you have a favorite song that you've done? I was going to ask you if you have a favorite song that you've done, one that you're just the most proud of, especially on this album here.
It's always the new one. It's always the new one. It's especially now, because again, because I only write when I feel like it's necessary. Whatever song is most current for me is the one that it's whatever battle I'm fighting at that point. And so in a way it informs a song for me now can inform a whole season of my life. And so but I will say that if I had to hang my hat on any one song to say, okay, this is me, it would be All You Get. Okay.
Now, I've seen you, of course, play guitar. What instruments do you can you play, and what do you like to play the most? Is it the guitar, or do you have a variety of taste in instruments? I'm like a lot of people. I'm a dabbler. When I was a kid, I played trumpet and actually trombone in the school band, and so that's the most off the beaten track thing that I can do. Okay. But playing, guitar, bass, keyboards is a lot of fun. If I had to pick my favorite thing besides singing, it would be playing bass. Okay. But not that I get it, probably because I don't get as many opportunities to do it as I'd like. But if I was going to hire me to do anything, it would be to play guitar. Okay. And I probably wouldn't hire me to play guitar. Oh, don't put yourself down, man.
No, I mean, it's just I know, whatever. Hey, I'd love the gig. You want someone to play guitar and sing backups? Then you got something. I got something special to bring. But I just know so many great musicians I've met, and especially guitarists. There are some really great ones out there.
Do you are you done with acting? Like, do you not do it anymore? Because I noticed you're.
No. Acting is once you're an actor, you never stop preparing.
You get a
I live like an actor. I work out every day. I do all the training things that I need to do so that I can be ready if it's needed. But I work in management for other actors and writers and directors. It's just I'm again sort of like with the songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a way that I can be of service to a production and bring my talents to bear on it, I'm always down to play.
You get a couple.
There's also a lot of people pursuing those things, and if you're not pursuing it, someone else is going to take that role.
You get a couple of films I do want to bring up. One, of course, you was in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Dream Master. Now, I've had Lisa Wilcox on here, and actually she was my first Skype interview. I had her on here. Brooke Bundy's been on here, and I think that might be it from the film Outside Yourself. What memories do you have working with Rennie Harlan and working with Robert Englund and, of course, Lisa Wilcox and Tuesday Night and all those?
Just being 18 and getting cast in that film and being, just being on fire with the inspiration of youth. And finding yourself among all these people who then, I didn't know it at the time, but they've become like a second family to me. Because of the horror convention culture that has grown up around Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger in a big way.
Yeah.
And that we've been, so we're part of his backing band. It means that we see each other a couple times a year. And some of us have been in relationships with each other. Some of us have been in business relationships with each other. Some of us have had, arguments and had, all these things. And like a family, we have continued, we really have this crazy intimacy that only comes from years of, loving and forgiving and getting to enjoy this weird thing that we were a part of, where, through most of our lives, we're not, except for, Lisa's still, she does a lot of cons and Tuesday to some degree, but most of the rest of us, Nightmare on Elm Street's only a big deal when we're at a con. And then when we're there, it is kind of like being in the Rolling Stones for a weekend. Oh my God, we're staying in the nice hotel rooms. Wow, people, wow, usually I'm just a tambourine player, but when you're a tambourine player in the Rolling Stones, it's a whole different gig, right?
Were you a fan of the franchise before doing the fourth film?
I'll be honest, I do not like to be scared.
Okay.
I'm scared anyway. So I never really was. I have to say that there's a crazy synchronicity because my dad was a dream psychologist, and I grew up learning about and sort of obsessed with and dreams. And so the whole dream mythology of Nightmare on Elm Street is really, really rich for me.
Do you have anything that stands out on the filming of this film? Anything that, any story about the process, about what you did in the film?
Well, I'll just say one thing.
Okay.
So for people who, first of all, you have to understand, pretty much every, because we go to cons and we talk about it a lot, every story that I have about Nightmare on Elm Street, I've told multiple times. And what happens when you do that on just a psychosomatic level is that you end up relating more to the actual story than to the story you've told multiple times. When you're a kid, when you hear a story about it, and then what your memory is the memory is the story you told, and not the actual memory. So it's weird. I feel like I don't even know if I have how many actual memories I have from Nightmare, because I just have the stories I've told about it many times. But I will say that there's a little bit of a controversy that my death scene was somehow lackluster. And there's a whole, because what happened was they ran out of the budget when it came to doing my death scene. So they had this whole big effects-driven thing, like a lot of the other characters had their death scenes. Like with the
cockroaches,
cockroach thing, or Toy Newkirk getting the suck face and being, shriveled by Freddy sucking the breath out of her, or on and on. There were just like most of the deaths had big effects, and they had some big effect in mind for mine. And at the last minute, they ran out of budget, and they decided to go a different way, which in some of the documentaries has been described by some of the production disparagingly. It's like, that was a lame death. And so I have people coming up to me constantly at cons saying, "Hey, man, I think your death was great." It's sort of like, when someone comes up and is like, "I don't care what people say. You're good looking." You're like, wait, who's saying I'm ugly? And this is part of my life now, is people coming up to me and being like, "Hey, dude, don't let them get you down." And what I always say is, hey, wait a second. That all those other actors, they use all these special effects, but my death scene was 100% acting. And if you see it, I have a karate fight with invisible Freddy Krueger. So in my death scene, it's really just me going from falling asleep on a toilet, Elvis style, which I kind of like, surrounded by these cheerleaders, and then going down in this elevator that throws me around all over the place, and I get to do a lot of fun sort of comedy stunt acting in the elevator. And then I have this big choreographed fight scene with nobody, and then I get killed. Spoiler alert, I die. But I actually loved it. I loved working with Steve Fierberg, who was the director of photography on that, who's gone on to do a lot of really great things. And I had so much fun doing that, and I was totally unaware that everyone in the production was so disappointed at not being able to do this big effects number that they were going for. But then afterwards, the guy from the effects department came up to me and was just like, "Hey, you know what? You saved our asses there, man. You totally saved our asses." And so anyone out there who feels bad about like whatever things, the effects heads might have said about my death scene in Nightmare on Elm Street, it was a blast. I'm fine with it. It's okay. And if you like the special effects driven stuff, the film's full of it. So you don't have to, it's not like the film doesn't have that. It's just my scene. It's all about the acting. And bringing it back to Natalie Wood for a second, one of the really nice things that Robert Englund has been saying about my performance in that film was that he compares it to James Dean, which is super high praise. And it makes sense, if anything, because James Dean was a big influence on me as an actor, but that brings us back to Rebel Without a Cause and Natalie Wood Said. So,
the other film,
I like when conversations get circular like that.
The other film I wanted to ask you about this is a really interesting title, Sorority Babes, or Sorority Babes at the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama. Now, last November, I had the pleasure of meeting Linnea Quigley, and I'm actually set to have her on here, and she's quite a hoot.
Well,
yep.
She's amazing. Yeah.
And you get to work with Linnea and Brink Stevens.
Yeah.
Yep. And two awesome ladies. I love the title of this, and I know she mentioned that this was the most interesting title of a movie she's ever been part of. Talk about being part of that film, because I know you had a lead in this.
Well, yeah, that was my first lead, and I was really young. I think I was 19, probably. No, I was still 18 when I shot that, and I'd been out in LA for about a year, and David Dakota was I had no idea that he was on the verge of what would be a pretty historic career, following in the footsteps of people like Roger Corman, just like churning out sort of weird B films for decades and decades and making that a sustainable thing. And over the time, working with some really amazing people. And he was always very an enthusiastic supporter of my career after that, which was really nice. And I got to work with all these women who had me completely, like, my eyes were bugging out of my head. I had crushes on all of them. It was very easy for me to play a stammering nerd, because that's how I felt in their presence. Yeah, I mean, if you've seen the film, it's just over the top, goofy. Like, no one had any idea that it would become this cultural touchstone in a way that it kind of has, as like the most, that kind of film of that era, right? And as you say, the title, it wasn't called Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama when we did it. It had a title that I'm sure you'll agree we would not be talking about it if they had kept this title, which was The Imp.
Oh,
and
I'm glad they changed it.
What?
I'm glad they changed the title to what it is now.
Yeah. So I remember being in the looping session with the other actors, which was basically recording lines of dialogue that got lost in the production and on the actual shooting days. And I remember someone coming in, maybe it was David, and telling us that they were going to be changing the title to Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama, to which one of the actresses said what I think is the funniest line that isn't in the film, which is, "But now no one's going to take us seriously."
As if anybody was before.
I know, like, we shot this. It was actually a pretty long shoot for David. I think we shot that over 7 days. They're actually talking about doing a sequel. And when I spoke with David about it, he's like, "We're going to do it in 2 days." That's Roger Corman. That's Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah.
It's terrible, but you got to respect it as just a craft. Like, this is there's a real craft to being able to make a movie that works for an audience with that kind of time constraint.
Linnea and Brink seem to be game for anything.
Well, and I think what I've heard is that Brink is going to be directing. So he's working on the script. I have pitched myself for a return. I would love to come back as Calvin. Calvin did survive, so it makes sense. And I'll be honest, all of these film is so weird. You do not, unlike songwriting, where you have total say in what you put out there. I guess if you're an independent songwriter, as an actor, you never have a say. It's always someone else chooses you. And as someone who does not really resonate personally with horror films, who would rather watch comedies and old films with James Dean and Natalie Wood, it's just a funny twist of fate that I have been a part of these iconic horror films. It's led to me meeting and talking with people I would never meet and talk with otherwise, and I actually love that. That's like one of the great gifts is
Yes.
that to be involved in something that gets you out of your bubble is really pretty awesome.
And of course, I want to touch upon the fact that you've also written books as well. Talk about that. Like I said, you're. I don't know. Like I gotta say, you're like dabbling in everything here, and I think that is great. I go at one thing, but you've done acting, you've done songwriting. Of course, you're a musician, and you've written books. Talk about that.
Well, I've only written one book. I do have another one in mind, but things there hasn't been time for it. But I wrote one book, and it's called Accidental Initiations. Actually, Accidental Initiations in the Kabbalistic Tree of Olympia.
Okay.
There we go with some more evocative titles, like Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama and Natalie Wood said.
Yep.
So the way I describe it is I was able to write it by giving up on the ambition of writing a good book.
Okay.
I don't think it is a good book, but I have been told by people who read it that it did achieve what I wanted, which is to be funny sometimes. And to tell, from what was for me a true story. So it's a true book and it's funny, but if someone's looking to read a good book, there are some great books out there. This is not that. I don't know if you ever read any of Abbie Hoffman's books. But when I was young, his books like Steal This Book and Revolution for the Hell of It, I loved them, and I feel like in the same way. I don't think they were necessarily good books, but they were true and they were funny. And if you liked Abbie Hoffman's voice, then it was a joy to spend 100 and something pages with this voice. So yeah, Accidental Initiations, it came out of me in a very synchronistic way. In a similar way to All You Get, it sort of came out in an explosion, and I didn't know what it meant at the time. I was about 70 pages into what I was describing to myself as a suicide note that would take long enough to write that I would change my mind. And it was just basically trying to tell the story if anyone cared, like, my life had gotten so complex to me that in order to explain it to someone, it took too much time. And so I was in all these relationships with people who felt like they were close, but who only knew a piece of the story. And I didn't want to have to tell the whole story to everyone over and over again. And so this idea of accidental initiations, which is a guided tour of I don't know if you're familiar with the Kabbalah, but in Kabbalah there's this Kabbalistic tree, which is almost like a multi-dimensional chakra map, and it's basically a map of consciousness in a way. And the Freemasons who built many of the cities, built the United States to a large degree, and probably Canada as well, when the Europeans were settling or invading this land, they built these Kabbalistic trees, these maps of consciousness into all kinds of architecture. And one of them was built into the city of Olympia, where I grew up, where I've lived most of my life.
Okay.
And as I was studying Kabbalah in my 40s, I guess when I was 40, I started to recognize that this image of the Kabbalistic tree was also there in this park that I'd spent so much time in, sort of in the same way I was describing Natalie Wood, that we can watch her as a child and through her death on film. It was a way like that. Once I realized that there was this map of consciousness that I had been in around my whole life. I have memories of being there when I was 5, and I have memories of being there, and I was a kid at like a daycare, and we would go to this park. But I also have memories of being young and in love and making out with someone in this park. And I also have memories of, I just have all of these memories, and I've been drawn to it my whole life. And so it had this feeling of oh, well, I've been accidentally initiated by this thing that now I can see myself in this map, and it tells me something about, not just about myself, but about my town and maybe about my time. And so through the book, I go through and basically talk about each of the sort of energetic nodes within this tree and where it relates to in the actual park, where it relates to in this map of consciousness, and then telling some story from my life that that somehow elucidates or illustrates that, illustrates that energy. So earlier we were talking about, you're talking about "Own Your Lips, Girl," that song, and there's a energetic node called on the Kabbalistic tree called Hesed, which represents mercy. And the story that I tell, and actually I should say that the place it lives in the park, there's this fountain there, and it's a little fountain for dogs, and there's a dedication to this woman who worked for the healing of the sick and the feeding of the dumb. And at the time, it's the dumb were animals. That's what they called the animals, the dumb.
Okay.
19th century, crazy. But so it's this very merciful place in this park. There are all these elements that sort of resonate with the theme of mercy. Whereas there's other parts of the park that resonate. That there's stuff around it that resonates with the opposite, which would be severity or a warlike energy. At any rate, so in my book, and I'll have to do this delicately, there's a story I tell about when I was bartending.
Okay.
And there was a drunk woman who was this model who was a friend of mine, who was a date of a friend of mine, and I was saying goodbye to them, and she was very drunk and rude to me in a way that had me say to her a word that women really do not like to have said to them.
Okay.
That rhymes with punt.
Well, I've used it. I get it.
And she slugged me, fist. No, it was just actually. She hit me with her hand. My face rocked back. She's a 6-foot-tall woman. I'm and strong and drunk, and she was angry, and she hit me, and my head rocked back, and I was like, "You hit me!" And she's like, "Oh, don't be a baby. It was just a slap." Which is okay, what kind of abusive world do you come from? And the chapter ends up being about, so the chapter is called that word punch. So punt, punch. And the chapter is about how, from a standpoint of mercy, that whole situation, even though it was fraught with violence and stupidity, it brought up something in me that made me have to think compassionately about her, and made me had to think compassionately about myself and about the whole situation, and bring a sense of forgiveness to this situation. And the person who we started talking about, who had done this talk about the Rolling Stones and the Collie Lips, when she saw that chapter title, she got very offended and said some things that were really, that were not what you want to, that were sort of hurtful to a book that was just being released. And when I said, "Own Your Lips, Girl," to her, you can now understand the full picture of that. And that song is an example of a song where I wrote that song because it was a song I needed to write, because there was something I was trying to express that was not being understood in the world. It wasn't a song that was written from the standpoint of like, I want to write a good song. And going back to this idea, maybe that's like the ultimate thing that's different for me. There was a time when I was trying to be really good at all of these things. And then at a certain point, I just realized that however good I'm going to be, I'm that good now. And now it's only worth doing it if it's in service or it's out of some pressing need. So, God, you must be asking good questions, because you have me really pontificating here. I hope this is not annoying for your listeners.
This is not annoying at all. Actually, I love it when my guests talk more than me, because that's what people want. People want to know. And you have, like I said, you've done acting, you've done music, and you've done writing. And I wanted to really get into all of those things, because not every guest I have on here have branched out into all those things. And of course, we got to plug your new album, All You Get. For the listeners, where can they get their hands on this?
Well, the last time I put out a record, it was on a CD, and I think it was 2001. And the whole business of putting out records has changed so much that I don't really, I know it's going to be out there in all the places where, like Spotify and iTunes and all those things, and that people putting them on their playlists and listening to them and sharing them and doing all that stuff is crucial to a record success. I also know that I have LPs that I'm actually just selling. If people are interested and want to get one, they should find me through radio8ball.com, which is my website, which is mostly focused on the podcast, Radio 8 Ball, which I also highly recommend people check out. We've had some amazing songwriters, probably some folks that you know, and some great guests. And it's all about synchronicity, and it's a very rich place to explore all of my different interests. But yeah, so All You Get, if you want to buy an LP, you can find me just through, I'm easy to find on the web, Andras Jones, radio8ball.com. And if you don't want to buy an LP, then yeah, just get them from from the streaming services, and like them and review them and share them, and just make me hip again.
I never touched on this, and it kind of slipped my mind. Radio 8 Ball, you do a podcast. Talk about that, where that came from, and that process for you. I do a podcast, but so it's interesting to talk to somebody else that does one as well.
Well, it started as a radio show on terrestrial radio at KAOS in Olympia, and then I developed it as a live stage show, and now it's been a podcast for 2 years, and we've put out, closing in on like our 600th individual segment. Each segment features a what we call a musical divination, where we'll have a guest who will ask a question like they would ask like a tarot reader or a magic 8 ball.
Okay.
And then we spin a wheel or pick a card, which determines which one of the songs from our featured musicians list they're going to play. So we'll have a songwriter who have a list of 8 songs, and say we'll have a guest like we had Viggo Mortensen on as a guest, and he asked if he was directed at to the people of the United States, said, people of America, will you choose the earth or your nation? And he said, actually, maybe this is just for everyone in the world. Will we choose the planet as an interdependent, cohesive thing that we are loyal to, or will we choose to be loyal to our nations instead? And he got a song from the great Canadian songwriter Veda Hilly. We spun the wheel. She was a guest. She had 8 songs on the board. And it came up a song of hers called Luck Lucky. Are you familiar with Veda Hilly?
I'm not, no, actually.
Oh, she's one of your Canadian best. Oh my God, she's amazing. Veda Hilly, Hille. She's based out of Vancouver. Mostly does theatrical work now, but her records are phenomenal. I mean, everyone, in Vancouver, she's a rock star.
Okay.
And anyway, so she performed the song "Luck Lucky," which was all about being living, sort of like my experience with accidental initiations, growing up in Vancouver and having this animalistic relationship to the place that goes deeper than its architecture, but is also connected to its architecture. But kind of about feeling indigenous to a place, in a way that isn't traditionally indigenous in the cultural sense, but is indigenous in the way that, maybe like a palm tree is in LA. There's no palm trees natural to LA, but you put one there and it belongs there. Wow. Or it acts like it belongs there. It feels like it belongs there. So, so Radio 8 Ball is this podcast where we do these musical divinations with hundreds and now thousands of, over 20 years, probably thousands of people. And listeners can find it wherever you get your podcasts. It's Radio 8 Ball, all one word, radio, the number 8 ball. And find an artist you like and dig in. You can follow it chronologically, which sort of follows my trip, or you can enter it from the standpoint of, here's a guest who I'm interested in, like Viggo Mortensen asking a question, or here's an artist like Veda Hilly, or like Anara George, or someone else, Ford Pierre and Jeff Berner. I'm thinking of Canadians, Sarah Wheeler, these great Vancouver artists. You might just, we've done series in different cities. You might say, I want to check out the New York shows, or the Vancouver shows, or the San Francisco shows, or the LA shows. So there's a lot of ways in, and but it's a real interesting web, and at the heart of every one of them is a live performance from a great songwriter.
Oh, that's awesome.
And should, because they're great. Yeah.
Well, you know what? The album is All You Get. And,
Are you going to play any songs from it?
You know what? I won't on this interview, but I can definitely play it on my live show.
Cool.
Sure.
Well,
I love
I'm very proud of it.
I love the Natalie Wood song, I got to say that.
Oh, well, I'm really glad. That was... I carried that song with me for a long time, and Ford Pierre, he's a national treasure in Canada, and he helped me to get it, to achieve a vision that other people had not even been able to grasp when I tried to explain it to them. So, I'm very proud of it. But it's so much easier to be proud of something when you know that you're only half of what made it.
Okay.
Great. Like collaboration is the best thing to be, especially, the fact that you gravitate to that song is great, again, because it was something that we worked on. I got to work on with an artist who I have so much respect for, and I feel like even though he disavows all participation in it, I have to keep giving him credit. I'm joking. He doesn't totally disavow. He just wouldn't let me call him the producer on the record.
Okay.
If you look on the record, it says directed and arranged by Ford Pierre. So it's a very cinematic record in that sense, is that he sees himself more as a director of an actor than as the producer of a record.
Well, Mike Gormley sent you my way, and he sent me a lot of guests over the past few years. And how did you come affiliated with him?
Just different people, different folks in LA, particularly a guy named Mark Platt, who's someone I've known as a songwriter, sort of another sort of jack of all trades like myself in the music business or in the entertainment business. And he was doing some work helping to, he had heard the record and he was sending it around to folks to see about getting them to play it or do things with it. And he hooked me up with Mike, and it's been great. He's a pretty old school cat, and I've had a couple of those guys working on this record. Him and Peter Jesperson, who used to manage the Replacements.
Okay.
Both have been sort of lending their wise counsel to my return to performing as a songwriter. So Yeah. Who was he sent? Who was he sent?
Well, I met him through actress Lisa Langlois, who's a good friend of mine now, who was in the movie class of 1984, and she was the one that invited me to my first con, because I assisted her at it. And I met Mike through her. I never met him personally, but just through email. But I got Lisa through him, and he sent me Ronnie Cox, and he sent me Johnny Hernandez from Oingo Boingo, a lot of various people, you know. So, yeah, I'd say Sheila Nichols, another one he sent my way as well.
Oh, I didn't know he used to work with Sheila.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
He didn't
That's
even.
Crazy. No,
He didn't even know Sheila did a song on High Fidelity soundtrack.
That's crazy. Yeah, no, I've known her for a long time. She's great. Boy.
Yep. Whew. You gonna do a song with her?
Oh, I would love to. I don't know. I mean, she's a busy lady, but we were actually talking about having her as a guest on Radio 8 Ball when we were first starting it as a podcast. But then she got called off into some tour or something. So, but this is a good reminder.
Yep.
Got to have her back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You should get Linnea Quigley and Brink Stevens to do backup for you.
Oh. That would be pretty cool. Well, and don't forget Tuesday night.
Tuesday night, yeah.
From Nightmare on Elm Street. She's a great singer. Yeah. There's a lot of talent in them Dar Hills.
Well, you know what, Andras, it was wonderful having you on here today, you know, and it is great exploring the many avenues in your talent and your career, and I really hope this record takes off, you know. Again, it's all you get. It's yes. And, you know, it's got some great stuff on it. And like I said, I found the Natalie Wood song quite inspiring, you know. But I really like how you come up with your ideas and how you play them out. So, yes. Again, plug one more time where people can get this album.
Well, like I said, find it wherever you find your streaming music. So iTunes and Spotify, and just wherever you get your music. If you're interested in getting an LP, find me through Radio 8 Ball. I encourage you to check out Radio 8 Ball, our podcasts out there, and most of the information about me is at the radio8ball.com site. And you may have to cut this out, but earlier today I was just talking with the people at the Halloween and Entertainment Expo in Calgary. I've been invited to go there with my Nightmare on Elm Street castmates, including Robert Englund, and we're working on maybe setting up a live performance. So I'll let you know if it doesn't come through, but if it does come through, leave this in there. And if people I know that New Brunswick is a long, 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 long way from Calgary.
Yeah.
But still, if there are listeners who are in or around Calgary and are fans of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, our cast will definitely be there on the weekend of October 11th. And I may be doing a live performance of songs from All You Get. And if that happens, then, that's why I'm giving it a plug right now. So thanks a lot, Greg, for having me on your show. This has been a really, I was actually a little bit worried because sometimes the movie conversations tend to be super focused on just Nightmare, and I only have so much to say about that. But this has been really great, and I really, really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to go on and on and on about my different fields of interest.
Well, I really wanted to talk about the album, you know, and I really was curious about the Natalie Wood thing, you know, because it's like, wow, you know, Natalie Wood said, you know, and All You Get. I'm like I said before, I heard any songs, like I was caught in the titles, you know. So musically, you really grabbed me. But Nightmare on Elm Street, I know I'd interviewed a couple people from it, and of course Linnea Quigley, I'm right now looking on Bookend. I hope eventually get Brink Stevens as well. But I met Linnea, she's pretty cool. And I had to bring up a couple of your films, but I didn't want to super focus on it because I know that you're here to promote your music, and I wanted to promote that, but also, talk about your acting and talk about your writing, like the book you did and things like that, and your podcast. So I wanted all those avenues explored here.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Anyway, before I let you go, would you mind doing a plug for my show?
Yes. Hi, I'm Andras Jones, and you're listening to Greg Gilbert, the Python Hyena, on Python's Paradise out of New Brunswick, Canada.
You ever been out this way before?
I have not made it to your particular corner of the nation.
Mm-hmm.
Closest I've been is like Toronto, Waterloo,
mm-hmm.
Hamilton, but that I know that's a fair bit east.
Yep.
South for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I go to Toronto now every year for Horror-Rama, and that was where Lisa invited me, and that's where I met Linnea Quigley. So, yeah. But it was wonderful having you come on here today, and I encourage you to keep at what you're doing. You've got a good imagination, and you get a gift for this.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. That means a lot.
Well, I mean it. So you take care, and God bless.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye.